We're now seeing insight through Lisa Page's testimony, through Peter Strozk's discussion of this, that it was the Department of Justice basically saying there's no way Hillary Clinton is going to be charged here because we're not going to use the standard of intent. FBI just completely went against protocol when they would interview her with fact witnesses in the room and not give her any other thing.
Newly released transcripts of closed-door testimony by former FBI agent Peter Strozk revealing the Obama Justice Department negotiated an agreement with Hillary Clinton's lawyers, giving the FBI limited access to Clinton Foundation emails. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live following all of this for us from London. Catherine, good morning.
Thank you, Sandra. Good morning. According to the newly public transcript, Strozk was pressed by the FBI about access to Hillary Clinton's personal servers that were at the heart of the Bureau's case into whether she mishandled classified information as Secretary of State. And Strozk told House investigators, quote, we did not have access. My recollection is that the access to those emails were based on consent that was negotiated between the Department of Justice attorneys and counsel for Clinton. Strozk was also pressed on his dismissal from the special counsel Russia probe over his anti-Trump texts. Strozk told lawmakers Robert Mueller never questioned him about political bias. Republican John Ratcliffe led the line of questioning. Quote, did you have any discussion with special counsel Mueller or the other attorney about whether or not those text messages reflected bias or prejudice against Donald Trump? And Strozk replied, no. In a statement, Strozk's attorney told reporters that his client has always called for the transcript's release and that the former senior FBI agent is pleased that his side of the story is now public, Sandra.
Right, and Catherine, you also have some news on the Steele dossier as a Florida court has unsealed records in a defamation suit against BuzzFeed.
That's right. Well, according to the newly released deposition, Sandra, an aide to Senator John McCain gave the unverified dossier to BuzzFeed, as well as about a dozen reporters here in Washington during the presidential transition. For nearly 2 years, David Kramer, who was at one time at the State Department, refused interviews with Fox News and our questions over his handling of the dossier, which came to his attention during a Canadian security conference. The dossier was funded by Fusion GPS, whose co-founder is Glenn Simpson. Kramer told the court that he believed he was singled out by its author, former British spy Christopher Steele, to lend credibility to the Democratic-funded opposition research. Quote, I think they felt a senior Republican was better to be the recipient of this rather than a Democrat, because if it were a Democrat, I think that the view was that it would have been dismissed as a political attack. The former head of the FBI's counterintelligence division, Bill Priestap, also gave this declaration to the court that confirms the FBI got the first 33 pages of the dossier from Senator John McCain in December of 2016. This declaration also confirms that President Obama was briefed on the contents of the dossier in January of 2017, about a week and a half before the inauguration, Sandra.
Wow. Okay, Catherine Herridge.
That is a wow.
Take in there. Thank you.
Mr. Fenton, let me begin with you. I would assume that you're familiar with the Department of Justice Inspector General report that was released in February of 2018 pertaining to Andrew McCabe and the conversation he had pertaining to the
Yes.
Okay. There's some interesting information that is revealed in that report, specifically a telephone conversation that McCabe had with the Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General, possibly Matthew Axelrod, pertaining to the Clinton Foundation. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about in that conversation?
Yes.
Okay. Can you briefly describe what that conversation consisted of?
Well, according to the IG report, which I do quote in my testimony, they had this conversation regarding the Clinton Foundation investigation in August of 2016. McCabe said that the Justice Department expressed concerns about FBI agents taking overt steps in the Clinton Foundation investigation during the presidential campaign. According to McCabe, he pushed back asking, "Are you telling me that I need to shut down a validly predicated investigation?" McCabe told us, the IG, that the conversation was very dramatic. He had never had a similar confrontation before with DOJ. But prior to that, senior DOJ officials refused FBI requests to issue subpoenas on Clinton Foundation issues earlier in 2016, according to the reports, and that, since then, supposedly there's been a new investigation launched but I haven't seen any of the indicia of a serious investigation by the Justice Department yet.
Well, I would agree that that was a very dramatic conversation, and McCabe said, as you mentioned there, that he had never had a conversation like this in his career at the FBI. Do you believe that this demonstrates that the Justice Department was actively trying to protect the Clinton Foundation from an FBI investigation?
Yeah, it's just one of, I think, a few pieces of evidence demonstrating that the Clinton Foundation was being protected by the Justice Department, especially during that election year. These pay-to-play allegations, for instance, that we uncovered, these emails, they came out in August of 2016. Not that we timed them to come out in August 2016. That was a result of the Justice Department taking 8-9 months to release them to us, or the State Department taking 8-9 months to release them to us after they received them from Hillary Clinton and Ms. Abedin. So this was a very tricky time period, and so I can imagine there was pressure on the FBI and Justice Department to do something.
What, in your opinion, would be the reason that they were trying to protect the Clinton Foundation?
Well, the Justice Department at the time was working with the Clinton campaign to target President Trump. They were targeting President Trump. One of the key folks involved in that was Peter Strozk, who's had a demonstrated bias as an FBI official against Mr. Trump and for Mrs. Clinton. The irony of the McCabe situation is that McCabe is accused of leaking in pushback to the Justice Department, saying that we are investigating Hillary Clinton, which happened to be accurate, but was not something he was supposed to be telling the newspapers. That's why he allegedly lied about leaking to it.
Would you say,
McCabe, there were some in the FBI who wanted to do this.
Would you say it's somewhat, at least causes some red flags for the Justice Department? It sounds what you're alleging is that they were actively involved in trying to influence the election.
Oh, it sure does. I think this is an area that needs to be explored. I wish it had been explored by this Congress. It wasn't sufficiently. I know there was pushback from the DOJ, and I know there's all sorts of concerns about foreign interference in our elections, but when you have bureaucracies like the DOJ putting their thumbs on the scales, it's something that both parties ought to be concerned about because, one day the shoe will be on the other foot, politically speaking, and we just want to be able to restrain the agencies from being their own arm, a branch of government.
So this may be another way of asking a similar question, at least a similar train of thought. Why would the Justice Department try to pressure the FBI to stop a perfectly valid investigation?
For political reasons. I mean, there were other investigations that were ongoing at the time before that concerned President or then candidate Trump and Hillary Clinton. So the complaint about overt steps targeting the foundation seemed to be, well, not credible. That's why Mr. McCabe reacted so strongly.
Well, I believe what you've just said is the whole reason we're here. And Mr. Hackney, although I appreciate your opinion, expressing why and how we need to do our oversight, what has just been said is the precise reason why we are doing oversight. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
We're happy, as always, to be joined by Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch, to give us an update on really, I got to say, Congressman Doug Collins of Georgia is doing a fantastic service to the American people by releasing these transcripts. Tom Fitton, I know this is something you've been calling for forever. Has there been any response from DOJ? Are they saying you can't do this? There's national security problems because I don't see any state secrets hidden in these transcripts.
No, they don't want to highlight their corruption in keeping these materials secret as out of deference to the Justice Department. They had sent these transcripts over to them, even though it was clear much of them had no classified information, and it's been radio silence. So that's why Congressman Collins, who is not known for being a terribly aggressive congressman, is releasing them on his own.
And we've got Lisa Page's testimony a couple of days ago, and now Peter Strozk's. Let's circle back onto Lisa Page for a moment, because a whole lot has been revealed. We spoke with Chuck Ross about it yesterday, but there's even more coming out now as people really come through it. We do finally have an answer from Lisa Page on what she believed Peter Strozk meant when they talked about an insurance policy, right? She confirmed this under oath.
Yeah, she confirmed it was the Russian investigation. Look, what comes out from both these testimonies is that the text messages that people have been upset about mean what they say. You don't have to kind of talk your way past it or interpret them in a light most favorable to the writers. They didn't like President Trump. They had an insurance policy in case he won, which was the Russia investigation. And they thought it was their duty to pursue this investigation, as I say, because they didn't like Trump. Now, they would tell you, well, just because they may not like the person they're investigating, it doesn't mean that they handled the investigation improperly. I don't think that would be persuasive to a jury, nor do I think it's persuasive to any other sensible person. And especially, it helps explain why, Larry, this investigation was allowed to continue and frankly fester given the paucity of information that there was any collusion. How do you explain the abuse of FISA? How do you explain that they were targeting a presidential candidate and the president so casually? How do you explain it? It means it's because they hated them. They hated him, and they were just as a result breaking all the rules to target him.
And by the way, we are now learning also, Tom Fitton, that when Robert Mueller found it, let's not forget, Peter Strozk and Lisa Page were on his team, the special counsel's team. When he discovered, or when he learned, I should say, he didn't discover it, but when he learned of these text messages, he did dismiss them. They got reassigned back to the FBI, but he then didn't investigate this. He didn't actually, under his umbrella, investigate what was going on with this obvious operation within the FBI and the Justice Department to investigate the president and to try to stop the president. Wouldn't that be something you would think that the special counsel might want to investigate and look into?
Yeah, I mean, if I were Mr. Mueller, I'd be very concerned that the whole genesis of his investigation was tainted.
Right. Unless Robert Mueller just believes that his whole job is to get Trump, if he can, not to actually investigate wrongdoing.
And you know what? That's what he is going to believe. That's what he was hired to do, okay? This is why you need adults in the Justice Department to say, we've got these FBI agents who hated President Trump. They were behind both the Clinton investigation and the Trump investigation at the same time. We still have questions about how this Trump investigation started. We're going to freeze everything until we figure out what went on here and whether everything was done on the up and up.
Yeah.
But Justice Department is just like some sort of freight train, and it refuses to be derailed despite all this evidence of corruption. And on top of that, you had this Peyton Place type of atmosphere there with this illicit relationship, adulterous relationship between Page and Strozk. And of course, anything Page wanted to do or Strozk wanted to do, you can't separate that from their personal relationship because it infected it. Because your girlfriend's saying I want to do X, the boyfriend's saying I want to do Y, and you don't have the normal checks and balances in place. And so the whole thing has been corrupted not only because of the animus against President Trump, but because of the adulterous relationship. What an unholy mess this is.
Yeah,
the whole thing's collapsing. It
is a complete.
The question is, how many people will it take out with it in terms of innocents like President Trump?
It's a complete and total embarrassment too for our federal government and for our Justice Department. Why there aren't more voices within our government speaking out about this and trying to get to the bottom of it is maddening. Tom Fitton is one of those people trying to get to the bottom of it on behalf of Judicial Watch, who does such great work. And I know part of the great work that you've done over the last several years is you were part of the uncovering of the Clinton email scandal, the Clinton email server scandal. So I'm sure you were interested in this little tidbit. Peter Strzok's testimony that's been released now, much of it focused on his role and his conduct in investigating whether Hillary Clinton broke the law or not. The Justice Department never got a warrant to actually take possession of this email server. They instead just negotiated to get the server, and the results of this negotiation was they weren't allowed to look at a whole trove of emails. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that sounds about right, and it comports with the materials that have been publicly released as well. And compare and contrast the way that the careful kid gloves treatment that Mrs. Clinton had with the targeting of President Trump and then candidate Trump.
Yeah,
it demonstrates you can't explain the disparate treatment but for political bias in politics.
I mean,
and the idea that you walk off the State Department grounds with 60,000 emails, you destroy half of them, and no one bothers to get a warrant, even though they know classified information was present.
And then they say, we'll go ahead and let you have it, but you can't look at any of the foundation emails. But, of course, part of the problem here, part of the scandal was that she was leveraging her role as Secretary of State to aid the foundation. And the only way to know that is to look at the emails and compare what was going on this server. It's madness.
Perfect sense if it's a fake investigation.
Yep.
All right, they were never going to prosecute her. It's pretty clear based on Page's testimony that no one in DOJ wanted to prosecute her. So why bother with the warrants? Why bother with aggressive questioning? Why bother with prosecuting people for perjury? DOJ wasn't going to do anything, so it was a pretend investigation. So all the normal things you might have had done for a regular investigation weren't done.
Yeah. Well, thank God we've got people like Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch, and some journalists and some congressmen.
Well, we're questioning people in the email matter. Just today, our attorneys were questioning the person who set it up in New York.
Oh, I can't wait to hear about that.
So it's not over, which is, but of course it's Judicial Watch doing the work and not Congress or Justice Department.
Thank you, Tom. Always good to talk to you. Keep up the great work.